What's good, everybody? Welcome into the Monday Smash here on Warchant TV. It is brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, alongside managing editor of Warchant.com. He is Ira Schofel. My name is Tom Lang, and welcome in one and all. Hit the thumbs up as you join tonight's show, as we'll be talking about Florida State football, the coaching stuff, behind the scenes. James Franklin's got a new home, a whole lot to break out today on the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Ira, how's it going this evening? How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. A lot of phone calls today with Red Tape City, but generally speaking, looking forward to the game on a short week. I want to know how this ends for Florida State in 2025, and it feels like Friday's game is going to go a long way, and you wrote about this in your 3-2-1. Friday's game is going to go a long way. On the road at NC State, a lot of chapters in Florida State football history there, many of them not so good. We've got another significant one coming up in 4 days, man.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to – I think when people talk about this topic, they're like, well, can it really come down to these two games? Is that really what's going to determine what Florida State does with Mike Norvell? And I just think it's a situation where you left things where they left them after the Stanford game. I really think they wanted to see how this played out. And then the way it played out is here we are. And so, I think if they get what they want, I think if the administration gets what they want, Mike Norvell is going to win these two games, and they'll be able to keep him and not have to pay him $60 million plus another $10+ million to the assistant coaches, and just to start over and see what they can get in the market. If things go poorly on Saturday and maybe they lose these last two games, I don't know that they can feel good about bringing him back, because what that would say to the fan base, how it might affect ticket sales and all that. So I don't know that I really don't know that they have a firm decision of what they're going to do. And I don't want to say that game on Friday night is going to determine what they do, but I think it has to, unless they put out a statement between now and then that no matter what happens, we're going with Mike Norvell. There's a possibility you lose these two games. And at that point, at 5-7, with your last two losses coming to a pretty average to maybe below average NC State team and a bad Florida team, that's going to be a tough sell. So I think in their perfect world, they beat NC State and you go out strong and you can bring him back. But I don't know that, it's just a tough situation. They're in a tough situation. I don't think there's any other way to describe it.
And this is clearly, you're right, it's a choice that they made, that they knew that it could go down to the wire. If Stanford wasn't enough, then, a loss to Clemson on the road probably was not going to be. But it does make for interesting viewership on Friday, Ira, because you have the 60-minute contest, but then you have another contest that's going on all at the same time. So it's just, as a fan, it's tough to parse through that. Because everything means more than just the gain of 6 or the loss of 5 or the interception or the fumble. And it's not the first time this has happened in football history in college or pro. It happens all over the country every year in both college or pro. But Florida State's been in a weird spot here, limbo, and it has been now for several weeks. And it seems like, this thing's going to go the distance, especially with James Franklin being named the head coach of Virginia Tech just a few hours ago, and Penn State knocking that buyout down. That'll be something fun to discuss, because it went from $49 million to $9 million. But it's just, it seems like now the dominoes are going to start to fall at some of these places where there have been openings for some time. And you wonder if Florida State is even going to participate in the coaching carousel this year. So it feels like, Ira, we're stuck in neutral a little bit here, but I think that's where the administration has said they're fine with that until more data presents itself, and everybody's just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, listen, I think it's clear that they do not want to have to fire Mike Norvell and pay all that money. And everybody can have their opinions on that. I know what your opinion is, and you can restate it if you'd like. But that's just where it is. The reality is, I just don't think they want to spend that money. And now people will turn that into, they can't afford to, or they're, Florida State's broke. That's what the Gator fans or whoever will say. And I think there's a difference between not wanting to spend the money because you don't know what you can get on the market based on how many jobs are open right now and what candidates you want, versus we don't want to do it just because we're just mad at Mike Norvell and we want to pay him to go away. And so I could see the the pragmatism of that. I also understand the fan base who's like, we're done, we want to move on, or the parts of the fan base who are in that camp. So again, I don't think it means that, that they didn't go after James Franklin. That doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't have gone after the perfect candidate. I mean, I think there's a possibility that they looked at James Franklin. Listen, I know for a fact that they considered James Franklin 6 years ago when they hired Mike Norvell. He was part of that process. I don't think they were enamored with him then. And it's different administration. Some people have come and gone since then. But he's kind of notoriously known as a difficult guy to work with. Going back to, I was just talking to an industry friend in the industry about this, in an athletic director type person. And they were saying, go back to when James Franklin was the head coach in waiting at Maryland. He was Ralph Region's head coach in waiting, and they ended up having to pay him $1 million to go away because they decided they didn't want him to be their head coach. There's kind of notorious stories in the background from him at Penn State, how he leveraged them constantly. It just, there's maybe some reasons why beyond what happens on the field. And listen, I mean, they did fire him, 8 games or whatever it was after going to the playoffs. So that may have been a situation where maybe Florida State would have acted if there was the right coach was on the market and James Franklin wasn't that guy. But I think the way they've looked at the situation, what it looks like to me is they don't want to spend that money unless they know they have a sure thing, and they're not sure that there's going to be a sure thing in this market. Now, I've said all that to say, I still don't know if you lose these last 2 games, how you bring back Mike Norvell at 5-7 after 2-10. So, again, I don't think they're in a good position here, but I just think that they're trying to minimize the damage that they can.
Yeah, I've got a take on the James Franklin part of it and the Virginia Tech deal. That's separate than my thought on the Mike Norvell part of it is, I understand the logic of if they don't win this game this week and they look poor against Florida, then maybe you have to move. But I'm a little bit hesitant and leery and nervous on that front, Ira, because if Stanford wasn't enough, I suppose the combination of NC State and Florida could be finally enough for the administration to move, but that they weren't willing to do it that night or in the days afterwards. That makes me awfully nervous in this situation. And I wonder if maybe Mike Norvell's words, now that we look at those a week later about hoisting the trophy, and that might piss some people off, but we're going to win one here. And he said other things like, I think we're going to have some people that can help us out this year and this upcoming cycle. Like, I'm starting to look at those words again, and I'm going, oh, my God, they're really going to do this. And, yes, for the record, I do believe it is a farce, but it's where we are, and my vote doesn't count. Theirs does, and I feel like every minute that goes by, if you were just doing live odds of is Mike Norvell returning, it gets stronger and stronger towards, he's going to be here again next year.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Would you said you would have done it after Stanford. Okay. Not knowing what you can get in the market, not knowing what it's going to look like, and knowing that it's going to cost you maybe $80 million or more just to get into the game, just get into the market. You would have no thoughts just because, hey, I'm so mad and I'm just so frustrated and I don't believe in you. I have to make a change, even though I don't know exactly what I'm going to get.
Yeah, I mean, look, they know the particulars better in terms of what they can afford and what they can't afford. But let's assume that they could if they wanted to. And I think that we agree that that's the case. If they really want to.
But let's define our terms, though. That money, just because you can afford something doesn't mean that money doesn't go away. Like, I can afford a better car than I drive, but I don't want to spend that money. So that's
understood. But like, if you drove for a living and you drove a better car and that better car could yield you money and give you money back, I mean, that would be the situation here. Is if you make the right move on the next guy, that guy can actually yield you money. It's not just like a sunk cost, and then the replacement is also a second sunk cost.
Possibly. If I bought a car, but in your analogy, I'm buying from door number 3. Like, I'm buying my car sight unseen. I don't know exactly what this car is, but I'm hoping it's going to be better.
Well, yeah. And in this analogy, what I'd say is I believe that the brakes on this car might go at any minute, and I'm going to go face first into something, and I'm going to die. So I know that I can't trust this car anymore. So I'm going to go get a new car, and I know that I have to go to the dealership, and I have to buy whatever's behind the curtain. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is. It's just, to me, I think at that point after Stanford, it's not good enough here. Like if you're gonna make the capital investments that you made to the stadium, to the football only facility, to even the buyouts last year to bring in new coordinators, you're setting and you're going to sue the ACC. You're not doing that because you think that mediocre or a 5-year build is good enough. You're doing that because you have expectations and you're sending a message that we believe that Florida State is supposed to be at a higher standard in terms of our comp, in terms of the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it sounds. And after making a huge move in the offseason to help prop Mike up, because you're taking away his offensive responsibilities to prop him up and to, you prune a little bit to grow for the long term, and you are capable of losing a game like Stanford and it's 4 in a row. Like at that point, to me, if I've got the money, I've seen enough out of him. The mistake we made was last year would be my take in that moment. But just because I made the mistake last year and I'm spending more money in the now doesn't mean that the fear of getting the next move wrong can't prohibit me from making this move. Like that would be the logic and the philosophy I would bring to the table there. Yeah. But again, they're looking at financial realities that I'm not. And so it's easy for me to say, like, I fully understand that it's easy for me to say that. It's just, I don't think the fear of what could come next can prohibit you from acting on something that is really not working right now. And even Mike kind of knows it. The contrition in that post-game press conference after Stanford, even after Clemson, I think he kind of knew, Ira, that the failure was to a threshold that, they could really let me go and they'd be right to do that.
Yeah, I think a couple things. First of all, I do want to clarify that when I wrote in my column today about how I see things playing out, and when I give maybe the devil's advocate perspective, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with this. I'm just trying to present maybe the perspective of the people who are not going to speak publicly right now about the situation. And so I think, to your point, like Mike Norvell, I think there's a ton of people. I know for a fact there's a lot of those coaches and staff members who, after that Stanford game, thought there's a good chance they were going to be fired. And I think that they thought if they lost to Wake Forest, they were going to be fired. And I don't think that they necessarily feel that they're out of the water just yet. So that's reality. But again, when it comes to making the decision, and you're looking at it from the big picture standpoint, it's not just the $60 million for Norvell, the 10 plus million for the assistant coaches, all the other things you got to do to bring in a new staff. On top of that, you're leveraged pretty much to the hilt already. You just spent up to $500 million on the stadium renovations and a brand new football facility that you have to pay these notes on. That money's going to come from somewhere. And so now you're taking on, again, if you want to pay this money, if you want to pay Mike Norvell 60, 70, 80 million, that total price tag to make this happen, that money has to come from somewhere. Now it's, and again, like I think Jeff talked about it today on your guys' show, that there's not an appetite from donors to cover that. There never really is. When Willie Taggart left, the way they raised money was to the Renaissance campaign, which was, hey, give us money to help bring in the next coaching staff and invest in the program. They didn't go out and ask people to give money to pay off Willie Taggart, because nobody ever wants to do that in any fan base. That's not a Florida State thing. So this idea that we're just going to go out to these heavy hitters and ask them to give $5 million a pop to make Mike Norvell go away, there's not a lot of appetite for that. So that's a challenge. That money has to come from somewhere. And whether it's maybe they divest real estate or holdings or whatever it is to make that happen, well, that's money that you're not going to have a few years from now to continue paying off your debts and also pay for the exit fee to get out of the ACC. So again, I think if this was a disaster, and in the moment after the Stanford loss, as we sat there that day, and you start thinking, well, maybe this is a disaster. They've lost 4 straight games. This team may be tuning him out. This may be going off the cliff. And so we may need to go with the nuclear option. But I would say that since then, and you could say Wake Forest is not a good team, and I would agree with you, even though they are 7-3. You could say Virginia Tech's not a good team, and I would agree with you. But they have won a couple games. They're playing better football. And so if you're trying to if you're looking for a reason to maybe keep the guy, well, if you beat NC State on the road, if you've got 3 or 4 wins in the last 4 or 5 games, say you beat Florida, then at least you can convince yourself that it wasn't worth going to the nuclear option with all of these other things in the backdrop. The $500 million in debt, what it would cost to give, and then the potential of having to spend this exit fee in a few years, whether it's $75 million or $100 million at that point. So I just think that it's not that the Stanford game wasn't terrible, but do you know it's over, or is there a chance that in year 2 with this staff that you can make it work? And so you're looking for these indications. But I do think where we've landed here right now with 2 games left, it makes it feel like those 2 games are going to determine everything.
Yeah, well, and that's where the fact that they do determine everything, if that's true, let's just assume that is so, that the administration and the powers are looking at these last 2 games as indicators. To me, that's even a discussion means that they're looking very hard for a reason not to fire him. Like that's what they want.
100%.
And they're squinting, they're pulling up somebody else's glasses. They're like, come on, give me a reason to not fire this guy, which is, as a fan, extremely frustrating because it does send the message that they're not broke. Everybody says the word broke, but it sends a message that I think, is this fair, Ira? They're cash poor. Florida State is cash poor right now because it would require some liquid cash to be able, if they didn't have these capital investments, would they have the means and probably the will to make the move if the football only facility was 5 years in the past or the West Side renovations did not happen? Do you think that they might have made the move already after Stanford? Because I think maybe if that economic reality was there, that they might have moved a little bit sooner on this particular subject. Is that fair to maybe at least ask?
I mean, it's possible. We don't know. I don't know for a fact. I just think when you put it all together, it makes it much more difficult to do it. But even still, then you get into the other part of the equation of, okay, who are you going to be able to hire and who are you going to be competing with? And listen, man, I think we'd be naive to think that they're not talking to Jimmy Sexton. They're not talking to other agents and industry insiders about what jobs are coming open, what coaches are going to be on the market, what those coaches are going to be looking for. And so, again, my understanding is, and I believe this is to be the case because I know it's the case at every school, they're constantly looking at the landscape of which coaches are available, which coaches are going to be, their agents let people know, hey, man, I might be interested if something comes open this year. And so they have an idea of what's going to be out there and the market's going to be out there. So again, I think that part of it is the part that we have no idea. If there's only a couple of coaches that you might really want that are going to be on the market and you have all these jobs open, is it worth it? So again, there's a lot of variables here. And again, I'm not saying that this is exactly what they should do. I'm just saying that I think there's more to it than just how do they not see that Mike Norvell is not the answer?
Sure. And I think that's where,
and I'm not saying you're coming at it from that way, but I do feel like there's a lot of, fan base that kind of gets there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much absolutism everywhere in our society right now where it's like, I can understand that there are economic realities and forces outside of the simplistic view where I'm sitting and saying, this is beneath us. And because I believe it is beneath us, but they might say in a private moment, yes, Tom, we agree, but here's the balance sheet. Now we could make it work, but if we get it wrong again in this moment in time, we're screwed till 2034. Do you want that? Or do you want to roll the dice with a controlled guess here and a controlled risk? And unfortunate as it may be, because we understand that there's a cost to apathy, and it's going to cost us this much next year as we're projecting in terms of season ticket sales, booster contributions. That sucks, but that's not the disaster scenario. So I've got 2 bad options, one that has a small percentage chance of working and one that has a decent percentage chance of total failure. Like I could sit down there and be presented that and understand why Florida State might be making the move they are, but it speaks volumes to me if that's where they're coming from, that Florida State is in a really precarious spot. Like you said earlier, they're in a really tough position, and it's not total disaster, but it's kind of on the brink, which is terribly annoying, Ira, because I like winning football games, and so do a lot of Florida State fans. And we believe that Florida State should be winning games at a really high clip, not the second worst clip in the conference in the last 2 years. So that's where it gets tough. And if they've got 2 road games to go to determine his fate, then that is a subtext-laden game on Friday night, and a subtext-laden game when they play Florida in mid-afternoon 2 weeks from now.
Well, the other thing to listen, man, if this is where it ends up going, and again, I don't know for a fact that Mike Norvell's coming back. I'm just looking at the scenario and the situation we're in right now, and I think that that's the way it's trending. But if if he does come back, my belief is they need to do two things. One, and you guys talked a little bit about on Jeff's show today, just the idea of looking at what Wisconsin's doing, looking at what maybe Maryland's doing, and saying, okay, we don't want to pay this coach to go away. We're going to put more money into player acquisitions and player development and try to win that way. I think Florida State, A, 100% needs to do that. And B, they really need to sit down with Mike Norvell, I think, if he ends up being the guy to stay, and sitting down with him and talking about, okay, let's honestly assess where you're at right now, your staff, in terms of scouting to player development, strength and conditioning, everything across the board, and justify to us why those positions need to be filled by who's in them now. What else could we be doing to get better? Because if you're going to stick with him, there's clearly other problems in the program. And so, that part of it, and maybe he's already talked to them about that. That's something I don't know. That was one thing that going back to 2017, and again, I don't, people get mad at me when I bring up the bad Jimbo times, but the conversations in 2017 were the administration said to Jimbo, listen, man, you have to change your staff. This is ridiculous who you have on your staff at that point. And it was ridiculous. And he knows it was ridiculous because he didn't try to bring any of them with him. Well, maybe one or two with him to Texas A&M. But and from what I understand, that Jimbo gave them a list of maybe 5 coaches that he wanted to change at the end of that season. And he talked about what he would want financially to make that happen. And were some discussions along those lines. And again, John Thrasher, former FSU president, may he rest in peace, he passed away recently. He told me at one point that he really didn't believe Jimbo was ever going to fire the coaches. Like, he thought Jimbo was trying to buy time because he knew he was going to be leaving, but he never had any intentions of staying at Florida State and firing those assistant coaches. So those conversations happen all the time. I don't think it was Sunday morning last year after the Notre Dame game that Mike Norvell just had the epiphany to replace those assistant coaches, those coordinators, fire the coordinators and Ron Dugans. It's conversations that take place over time. So Mike Norvell may already be talking to them about things he wants to do and they want him to do this offseason to help fix the program if he ends up staying. But that has to be a huge part of it. I am not advocating in any stretch that this thing is fine and they just need another year. Like, I do think that they need to consider looking at everything in the program.
Would it be overly simplistic for me to be frustrated by the fact that it feels like, as a fan, last year you had to replace the coordinators because they weren't working, so you had to force his hand to be able to do that. And now in this particular situation this year, if you need to overhaul front office stuff and maybe some assistance on the football operations side, that the message is, well, because you're too expensive to fire, we got to prop you up with all the people from all different directions that we possibly can. Because that's the way it feels like to me. If they do that, and let's say they've got a new general manager and some player personnel, that new heads of recruiting or scouting or whatever it is, and they want to modernize it and they want to have a front office, so to speak, that's the way it's going to look. Is like, okay, well, now you don't call plays, and we tried that. And now you're also going to have like a co-person in the room to help with player personnel. We probably start fresh if we didn't have to pay so much to walk away. That's the way it presents in that moment, at least. And you'll get over it, and then you move on to covering the team. That's the way it feels like.
No, I hear you, but are you better off, cutting off your nose to spite your face? I mean, is it better to say, we'd rather you not do that and spend all the money and maybe not get as good of results? Like, if you're as the people making the decisions, and again, this is all speculative, but the people that making decisions have the responsibility to do what's best for FSU and the dollars that they have available. And if the dollars that they have available make more sense to help Mike Norvell build up this staff and put more money into NIL and player acquisitions, and if that's a better investment than paying him to go away and starting from scratch, then that's what you would do. Like, you would not do it just because the fans or some people in the media are going to think you're just propping up the head coach. So you can look at it that way, but I think you also, if you're making the decisions, you got to make the decision that makes the most sense financially.
Absolutely. And that could be, you know, what the numbers point them to do. They could be wrong, and we could be wrong, just like we could be wrong. That's the hard part here, is clearly somebody's going to make this call. And I hope once they do, they stand in front of a microphone and they define why they made the decision that they did. Doesn't have to be ours, but you can come on down to Warchant TV. But it's just, it would be nice to have a message at the end of this with whatever determination they make from the person who actually made the decision, whoever that is, whoever had the deciding vote. Set the course and set the expectations for Florida State, because right now, what we're left to do, as we've done for the last half an hour here on the Monday Smash, is speculate about, you know, would they draw this conclusion because this assumed scenario is before them, rather than here's why we made the decision, here were the numbers, and we went down this path. I know you can't dog on anybody from a standpoint, but.
Well, and the challenge is they're going to have to be full-throated supporting Mike Norvell for the most part. You know, I mean, they can definitely come out and say that this was not satisfactory. This is not to the standard we want to be at. And we've talked about the direction, but they can't come out and say, listen, man, we don't want to pay the guy. You know, we want to figure out a cheaper alternative. So they have to be, they have to be careful with what they say. But yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, man, if the buyout wasn't $58 million, yeah, I think he would have been fired after Stanford. But the buyout is $58 million. And so
it's funny.
We can't act like, but it's part of the equation. But it's a huge part of the equation. And it's, you know, you say Florida State's cash poor. All these schools are. I mean, all these schools are leveraging themselves. That's why we're talking about private equity. That's why we're talking about, the things that these schools are doing. So many of these schools are in debt, and these are the decisions you have to make. I mean, I'm guessing finances are part of the reason they're not firing Luke Fickell. I'm guessing finances are part of the reason they're not firing Mike Loxley. I mean, it's part of the equation.
Well, and if that's the case, and I understand that they are taking this decision down to the end of the year, then that statement after, you know, Stanford, it might as well have just been, he's back, guys, because it could have helped you stabilize things in terms of
except if the wheels did come off.
Yeah.
That's the reason you couldn't do that, because, I mean, again, I think their hope was it was going to work out, and I think their hope still is it's going to work out. But if you said he's definitely coming back at that point, what if Stanford was an indication that this thing's going off the rails? Mm-hmm. Now you're really in trouble. So again, I think they're trying to play it down the middle, and it's going to be uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, this has been an uncomfortable but good conversation. It's one that we need to have. I think everybody needs to have. I see it going on in the chat right now. Thank you to everybody interacting here on the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, somebody who is extremely passionate, and I'll bet he wants to tag in on this conversation right now, because Russ has thoughts. He's always got thoughts. What he also has is an excellent business that can help you with all of your insurance needs if you live in the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. As a customer of State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, I've seen the customer service first class, and I've seen it right in front of my eyes as I had a couple of weird asks with the penthouse unit that I have here. Contracts needed to be changed and reworded, and they worked with me within hours. They had an answer for me. Ira, fantastic operation that he has that is based out of the East Coast of the state of Florida, but operates and serves so many people across the whole nation.
Yeah, Russ is a great guy, and he does have opinions, no question. You and I both get them via text, but he's also a huge Knoll. And like a lot of the people we're talking about in these conversations, no matter what Florida State ends up doing, he's going to support FSU. He always has, and he supports them financially. And it's just a great business. They do great work. That's not the only reason we would direct your business to Russ Voorhis and his insurance agency, but it is good to know you're dealing with a good person who has a lot of the same interests you have, and we recommend him highly. If you have just want information, his staff is very happy to just answer your questions. They'll give you quotes. You can go to the website russvoorhis.com and get information that way, or you can talk to him on the phone or go in person over there in Jacksonville Beach. And he's more than happy. He and his staff are more than happy to help you out. And if you tell them you heard about him on the Smash and Warchant, that just makes them feel a little bit better, because they love helping other Knolls.
And they have been consistently doing that at Warchant and at Florida State. Thank you to State Farm agent Russ Voorhees. We're going to get to contributions in just a second, as we have quite a few tonight on a spirited edition of the Monday Smash. Wanted to check in on the Tribal Council. We're going to be doing this a little bit more often on the Monday Smash, just seeing what's going on over there. Of course, James Franklin and his name is the number one topic of the day. And this is something to what we've just talked about for a long period of time, but it looks like Crazy Seminole is the handle. I really hope the brain trust at FSU has something up its sleeves, because not even getting a whiff of Franklin is a bad look. I don't know that I agree with that. Ira, do you have any immediate thoughts on the FSU administration, James Franklin choosing Virginia Tech, and how that projects to make Florida State look in the whole process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, the phrasing to say that it's, they didn't get a whiff of him makes it sound like he chose Virginia Tech over Florida State. I mean, I think it's clear if you watched kind of how this was played out, pretty soon after James Franklin was let go at Penn State, and Florida State did lose to Stanford. It was made pretty clear to people at Florida State that James Franklin was interested, and if Mike Norvell did leave, that James Franklin was certainly interested in the job. I've heard that from sources inside the football program. I've heard it from sources outside the football program. It's pretty common knowledge, and to the degree that I even know people who have ties to James Franklin who were interested in maybe coming to Florida State if he got the job, because they thought that was a possibility. I think the statements you heard over the weekend from basically his agent and unnamed sources that went out to all the reporters over the weekend, that he was going to start talking to Virginia Tech unless something else happened. And, here you are. And now he's taking his deal with Virginia Tech. I think if Florida State wanted him, I think they could have got him. I just don't think that they wanted to go down that road. And I don't understand the whole thing with the buyout, why it's been negotiated down to $9 million. I think it was a 20 something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
49. It was down 49-9, I believe.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what's going on there, exactly why he negotiated that down. And now Virginia Tech's going to be on the hook for his full salary. But that was kind of the reason early on we thought Florida State really might be interested, because if he owed all that money by Penn State, then maybe Florida State could get him cheaper. If that wasn't the case, then that may have been the reason Florida State wasn't as interested as people might have thought.
It is confusing on its face about the Penn State restructure. The only way that makes sense from Franklin's standpoint would be, I don't know, there's a for cause that they could have taken it, and they could have taken it to court. But if there isn't, absent that, Ira, then that might be the most ultimate Jimmy Sexton flex of all time, that he was able to get Penn State off the hook for some money so they could spend more on their new head coach while Virginia Tech is paying full freight. This is one thing where I said a few weeks ago, as we discussed this here, I like James Franklin at a certain price, but I'm looking really forward to see what Virginia Tech paid him, because if it's anything in the neighborhood of 9 or 10, that's Florida State would have been silly to do that, which is where we both very much agree that the next move by Florida State does not need to be one that includes a buyout that hampers you from making basic decisions in the best interest of the football program, because that they're not operating with both their hands in front of them. One hand is tied behind their back because of money in this situation. If Virginia Tech and Franklin agreed to a deal that is at that clip, $8.5, $9.5, $10 million a year or more, I would have panned that, and I think you would have as well, because we want to get out. We both agree that you got to get out from this cycle of coaches having you over a barrel, and then your future is tied to them, whether they're coaching for you or not.
Yeah, especially if it was going to be a long-term deal, like 5, 6 years, 7 years, something like that, which used to be kind of standard, was 5 years. Now it's gotten to these much longer contracts because schools don't want to pay. They want to be able to guarantee a lump sum or a big sum total, but they don't want to pay all that money year by year. So they'll give a long-term contract. But then, you're stuck for eternity, it feels like. And that's kind of where Florida State is with Mike Norvell. They could have gotten him, for fewer years if they paid a little bit more per year, but they, have this long-term deal, and now you're kind of married to it for a long time. So, but it is going to be interesting to see I want to hear more reporting out of that, because why was he willing to come it down? And the fact that LSU is apparently trying to challenge Brian Kelly's buyout and saying that there's some cause issues there. It's going to be interesting to see what these schools are bringing to get these, or, what these schools are bringing to get the buyouts down, or why the coaches would agree to it.
Eric, thank you very much for your contribution. He says, good evening, guys. Do you all think Franklin to Virginia Tech is more so Franklin's impatience with the FSU job not being open, or the FSU administration's not seeing him as one of their top candidates should the job become open? And this is getting to the conversation that we just had, because you're not kidding. He was like the kid, it's homecoming, the dance is coming up, and he is around Mackenzie and Fiona in the hallway, and he's yelling to his friends, I think I'm taking Donna to the dance, unless I can go with somebody else. Might go with Donna. Well, Virginia Tech is Donna, and Donna and this kid went to the dance together. Do you think, Ira, that's because Florida State said, nah, not at that price? Because I kind of have a sense that might be the way it might have gone.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. Listen, man, if he wanted the Florida State job if he had his choice, he's not taking Virginia Tech over Florida State. If Florida State wanted it now, and again, even the over the weekend reporting, if he thought there was a strong chance he could get the Florida State job, I think he'd still have Virginia Tech waiting. Who are they going to go get? Like, when the market opens up, maybe there's some other candidates that they'd be interested in, but I don't think Virginia Tech's in a position to say, you know what, James, we're shutting the door on you if you don't sign today. I don't think they're in a position to make that ultimatum, because who else is out there? Like, who are they going to take instead of him in terms of who they could get right now? So I think he could have waited. I think either he or Jimmy Sexton probably got an indication that Florida State was not going to be in the market.
Z-Chan, thank you very much for the contribution, the official DMD of Warchant TV, honorary title, of course.
Real quick, just because words get parsed. When I said because Florida State won't be in the market, I'm not saying they won't ever be in the market, and I'm not saying that they won't be in the market at some point in this cycle. I'm just saying they weren't interested maybe in him at that price right now.
I hope they're not in the market at $9-10 million for a head coach. Please don't do that. I'm sure they're probably not. Z-Chan says, if Norvell is kept regardless of record and fans cancel season tickets, they aren't true fans, period. I can't go that far, Z-Chan. Just like I wouldn't call you a sucker or a sap for renewing season tickets if he loses the last two games and goes 5-7. Or people need to do what they want to do. They express their fandom in the way that they're going to express it. I understand the sentiment, support the program, always support the program. I'll never root for Florida State to lose as an alum. But if folks say that they're not making the change and that's not good enough and I'm not renewing, man, I don't blame them. Just like I don't blame you for renewing, and good job. He put later in the chat that he did renew for next season. So that's why we love Z-Chan, because he is as passionate as they come.
Yeah, everybody's got to make their own decisions. No, 100%.
Yeah.
Because listen, even if you're so mad at the situation and you don't want to act like you're condoning their decisions by re-upping your season tickets, but you also may want to be a season ticket holder in the future. So you don't want to like get out of line and lose your seat. So people have a lot of things to consider. Some people will make the decision. It doesn't mean they're not good fans, but everybody's got to do what's best for them, like you said.
It just reminds me 20 minutes later of a more grown-up conversation when I was in the student section and kids were yelling at each other about Drew Weatherford and Xavier Lee and who was actually Florida State's best quarterback, and the absolutism of it all. I'm like, guys, shut up. Neither are good.
There also is option C. Neither one of them is the answer.
Devo, bring out Devo, Devontre Richardson. He was option C for a little bit of a moment there. He had a moment in the sun or two.
That one Wake Forest game when they each threw 2 picks, like they tried all of them and they all played.
That was not 30-0. That was the other one. It was like 13-0 or 17-0. It was a cold, dark night for Florida State that night. Hayden says, hire me. I've won 2 natties with the wishbone, flexbone offense as FSU in college football 26. Some call me the best to do it. I didn't know Paul Johnson learned how to play video games. I see you out there, Paul. Thank you, Hayden. Appreciate that. First name John says, smash. Any chance to get another R-rated conversation with Jeff and Tom? That was a hit. Hope you're well, Tom and Don, Ira. I don't know. We'll see, John. But I do enjoy those conversations. Speaking of Don, Ira, what is the threshold? I feel like this is Corey with hour number 2s in headlines. What is the threshold for shots, sir? What will it be?
Haven't been in a shots kind of mood lately, Tom. I'll be honest with you. If they win at Carter Finley, I'm doing shots. Listen, man, I have gone to, and I don't know why listen is my word of the night. I've said listen 6 times now, but I'm going to try not to do it anymore. But I've gone to enough losses at Carter Finley, and I've been trying to tell Corey now for 2 decades about how hard it is to win at Carter Finley. And so if they get a win there, against all odds, against this great NC State Wolfpack team, I'll do shots next week.
I will be there and I will join you for those shots. I got some tequila with my name on it. If you got tequila with your name on it after you take the stage. And just because, how much fun could that be, everybody? You want to dare to dream for just a moment? Here's 10 seconds of glory.
I'm like Pavlov's dog. I feel like I need to take a shot now, but I'm not doing it, Tom.
Fair enough. But if for no other reason, Knowles, if for no other reason on Friday night, we need to hear that music 7 times next Monday on a Thanksgiving week edition of the Smash. We're going to catch our breath for 15 seconds. It's going to be a quick couple of breaths. And we'll be right back here on Warchant TV for the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Contributions. Seth says, actually, the fear of getting the next move wrong has to influence this move. It is irresponsible to pay Mike and his coaches tons to go away and risk doing it again with another coach. I find that interesting. There's a whole lot of, I don't know, Ira. It feels like a paradox here in some of these arguments. It's depending upon which side you wish to take. Is it chicken or the egg? I say fear can't be a prohibitor. He says fear has to be a consideration. Are we both right? Are we both wrong?
I think it's I just don't think there's a right or wrong. I mean, I just think it's part of the equation. And it's not like there's not, again, like to your point, you can point to evidence either way. If you're concerned about that, you can point to Auburn. You can point to Florida. There's a lot of schools you can point to that keep firing coaches and keep hiring coaches, and it doesn't work, and they just kind of keep digging a hole. On the flip side, you can point to Kurt Cignetti, who they found at James Madison in Indiana and said, and he's completely changed their program. So, you can look at it either way. It's just depending on which way, you want to look at it. But I think, again, if you felt strongly that if one of two things was happening, if you felt strongly that Mike Norvell can't turn this around, then you have to make a move. Or if you felt strongly that you knew where you were going to go next, and it's worth it, then you can make a move. I think they're just somewhere in between.
Yeah, no, that's fair. See, I think part of the reason I'm so in the camp that I'm in is, like you, I think you can do this for a whole lot cheaper with the head coach. So I'm that guy that's clipping coupons and saying, oh, look at how much we can save. We can still shop there, but we can go from the gas guzzler to a really nice hybrid. And look at how much mileage we get out of this. I really think it can be done in this new era of college football that we're entering at pennies on the dollar for a coaching staff. But you also have to find the right guy, because if you don't, then you look like a bunch of poor clowns too. So I get it. There's a damned if you do, damned if you don't element to it. Let's see. Ecuador Man AOG says 2 ACC road wins in 2 years. Crappy Mike's staying. We'll see. We'll see. If he gets to 3, maybe. Cody Johnson says FSU fired Bobby Bowden, but not Mike. Cody is still remembering the lost decade days. And Ian says unacceptable, period. Thank you all for your contributions. And Florida Man in Alabama, he's been a member of the channel for 3 months. Could be worse, boys. FSU could be suing a fired head coach, letting the governor make firing decisions, and trying to pay Lane Kiffin $13 million. That Louisiana thing. Ira, do you wish you were covering that right now? That DeSantis was pulling a Louisiana governor and we had that type of stuff going on? Or is it just best to watch the flames and smell them from over here?
Yeah, I would not want to be covering that. Mostly because I just think the whole thing is the problem there is you do have this, power struggle that's been going on forever, going back to Les Miles. And I'm sure, and we only were very intimately knowledgeable about what's going on with Les Miles because Jimbo was involved in all that. But I'm sure it's been going on for years. And like I said, Auburn, there's some other schools as well where this is just a day that ends with Y for them. Florida State has not usually operated that way. And again, I am not saying that Mike Norvell's done a good job. And I'm not saying that they don't need to look at everything in this program and try to fix it. Just saying, you have to be realistic about what you're spending and why and what you're getting out of it. And so, we'll see what they come up with. But whether or not, and I haven't written this yet, but I probably will write it at some point, whether or not Mike Norvell stays or goes, man, I hope that they do everything they can to really examine athletics and the football department and what they're doing, what they're spending, who they're spending it on, who's in this operation. Do they need to be in this operation? Do you need to get better people around Mike Norvell? Because I don't think he's done a good enough job with that. I think everybody points to the recruiting is the number one reason that Mike Norvell has not had the success that everybody wants them to have. And that's fair. But 1A and maybe even 1A or 1B, we'll see, I think is the staff, the overall staff he's brought in from top to bottom. I'm not saying everybody over there needs to go, but I just don't think the staff has been good enough. And I think you see this year the improvement that they did make in coordinators has paid off. There's a lot more things I think that can be fixed throughout the football program. And if you do all that, then maybe that props him up, as you want to say, or just helps him be successful.
I do want to say that. You're right. I just wonder, in your opinion, with the relevant information that you have, understanding that we both, we might have a little bit extra than a layman Seminole fan walking down the street. Certainly you do more than me because you talk to the power brokers more, but we have imperfect information that we're going on right now. With that said, with that qualifier out there, what would you do in this set of circumstances? Would you have let it get past Stanford? Would you make a change? Would the last two games matter to you? What would it be from your perspective?
Yeah, like you said, it's hard without all the information. I would like to think that I would be able to identify. If this is my dream scenario, I don't know if it's true or not, but I would like to believe that I could identify the head coach I want. And that I would know that that's the guy. I believe in him because I've been doing this research for the last year, since 2-10, maybe the last year and 3 months since the Boston College game last year. At that point, I feel like maybe I would have done all the research I could possibly do to know exactly who I want. And that maybe it's 3 coaches or 4 coaches that I know. I really feel like we can get these guys and they are slam dunks. I believe in them. And then now it's okay. Can I convince the powers that be above me to do that? Now, again, this is, that's part of the equation that we also don't know. Does Michael Alford want to make a change, but the people that control the purse strings are saying no? Is Michael Alford, they've talked about their alignment so much. I get the impression maybe there's some difference of opinions in some of the people in the power structure. And so, even if that's what I've been doing, I don't know that I could pull it off because at some point I have to get the blessing of other people to make the decision. So, yeah, I would like to think I would have been in position to make the change. I also would say this, though. I would not have done what they did at the end of last season. I would not have gone out and I'm not saying they shouldn't have fired Alex Atkins and Adam Fuller because I think that things were going in the wrong direction. But I'm not sure I would have gone out and spent what they spent on the coordinators that they spent that money on to do what they've done this season, which kind of locked them in a little bit further. So, again, I think that I'm not saying they made all the right decisions, but I think I would have done something different, but I don't know that I would have just after the Stanford game said, okay, we've seen enough. Let's spend this money and try to find somebody.
Yeah, and I could play the role of the other side here and make a compelling argument for keeping Mike Norvell, which is what you're talking about. You make the replacements on the coordinators. I know you just said you wouldn't have done it, but the material improvements from those coordinators, we've seen that. You've seen that in most every statistical measure that Florida State has gotten better on both sides of the ball, in some ways more significantly than others. I look at the capability of a team that beat Alabama, and I say that while it's thin, they did put together a roster that was capable of doing that overnight, essentially, with one change. And if you have a quarterback who doesn't get hurt, a couple of bounces go your way, a couple of whistles go your way, then you're sitting at 8-4 and 9-3 at the end of the season. All your goals are achieved. What the hell are you complaining about? Like, that would be the path that I would go and argue for Mike Norvell. Because I do think there is some veracity to the idea that Florida State at 5-5 right now, they really could be 6-4, 7-3.
Right.
The Virginia game is the one that sticks out, but so Stanford. Like, is it so far fetched to believe that they could have been in that place?
Or Pitt, they could have easily beat Pitt, especially if they had their receivers available. The whole receiving corps was hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could make that argument if they keep them. That's the argument they're going to make. But that they haven't seen that as enough in and of itself, Ira, for them to come out and say, no, you've got a couple of 50-50 coin tosses that didn't go your way. That they haven't done that yet tells you that this thing really, when they put out the statement, maybe I shouldn't have yelled at them. They were telling the truth at season's end. They're really taking this thing down to the wire.
Well, and the reason I say what I say about the coordinators is because, and 4 other assistant coaches who also have all multi-year contracts, is I believe it's about players, not coaches. I mean, I just think the reason college football coaches made what they made for years and years and years is because they were the Messiah coaches, and they're the ones that built the rosters. And so, when Bobby Bowden went into a family's home and he got that recruit, even though maybe there's 2 other All-Americans at his position, but that kid really wanted to play for Bobby Bowden, like that's what you're paying for. That coach has the ability to acquire that talent. In this world, man, give me a loaded roster. And there's a lot of coaches out there that that can coach those guys. So again, I don't think that Florida State's not spending money on NIL and revenue sharing, but I'm going to guess they could have spent more if they wanted to. I'm guessing there could have been other players out there that they could have gotten if they wanted to. And what if things didn't go well this season, like you lose 4 straight games and you want to get out of it? Now you're in a bigger hole than you would have been by signing those contracts. So that's the reason I would have been leery of doing it. Also because I think it may have affected Mike Norvell's relationship to the team. Like I think going to the CEO role, I think may have impacted a little bit his relationship to the team. I think some of the things we've seen on the sidelines and things like that maybe are bubbling up that maybe wouldn't have normally. So again, it's all speculation, but I personally don't think that was the way to go. But that's definitely the path they chose, and it just makes it even more difficult, I think, to untangle.
Here's one concrete fear I do have is because if you were to make the move, it's going to cost you money. We all understand this. Now, I'm sure they've run, or I would imagine they ran a cost-benefit analysis on all this stuff about what loses us more money. But just from the day-to-day operation, this is very small thinking. It's not the 10,000-foot view. It's the 10-foot view. If you keep them, what's your NIL budget going to be outside of your rev share at 20.5? Is the collective going to be funded well? Or will people take their money and walk away in that scenario, or at least a big share of it? And you're creating a self-fulfilling issue for yourself about loading up the roster. Like, you might be able to get some dudes in here, but in terms of loading up the roster, I don't know that you can do that without a surplus beyond whatever they're spending out of the $20.5 million. I'm assuming, one would have to assume, right, that they did look at that projection and that scenario as well of, well, if we keep them, this is going to be our bottom line figure of NIL plus rev share. If we move on, this is going to be our bottom line number of rev share and NIL. Would you think that they probably have had that thought as well?
You would assume so. And I, if you go back historically, and again, I'm not speaking about this specific example, but I know towards the end of Coach Bowden's tenure, this was the feeling. And I know that this was probably the feeling. I know this was the feeling from some of the people during going into the second year with Willie Taggart. And part of the reason I think they wanted to make changes going forward, the people that have to raise the money, and back then it was just Seminole boosters getting donations for the annual fund to pay for everything in scholarships and all that. Now there's other people who have to raise, other money that go to the players. And those people, I'm sure they're all for making changes because they were towards the end of Coach Bowden's tenure, and they were, because the easiest thing to sell is something new. And when things are not going well, it becomes more and more difficult to raise the money you need. So I'm sure that's part of the conversation. I'm sure they're hearing about it from people who are in those channels in terms of trying to raise money. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you make this big decision, because those dollars are going to be tougher to come by. Now, how do they solve that problem? I don't know. I mean, they'll have to figure that out. But I don't know that forces you to make the bigger decision.
So in sum, it's been a very good discussion tonight. There's more of this discussion continuing tomorrow. Seminole Headlines, 1 o'clock live on Warchant TV. Wake Up Warchant will be available in your inboxes or in your podcast feeds, that is, or on Warchant TV overnight. I just wonder if you were to say, and I know you've written great pieces on this, Ira, for like the 5 misconceptions from last week, 5 misconceptions for fans of where this Florida State is in this situation. is it fair to say that the number one hindrance for not making a move is the money? Doesn't mean that it will be the final decider, but it is a humongous reason why on Monday, November 17th at 5-5, 2-5 in the ACC, Florida State doesn't have a clear direction in terms of does he stay or does he go? Do you think it's money?
I mean, if that is the case, then yeah. I mean, I think that that's the number one factor that they have to weigh. And again, a hindrance. Like we can quibble over words, Tom. It's just because hindrance implies you couldn't do it. It's preventing you from doing it. To me, it's just information. Like these are all just facts you have to consider when making a decision. And again, I made the house improvement analogy today on Jeff's show. You can do it with car improvements as well. Is this car still going to get me where I need to go? Or do I need to, could it get me where I need to go if I repair it? Or do I need to start over, trade in and get something else? These are, and again, it's a much huger scale. And to your point, yeah, there's return on investment factors to consider, but even people in businesses have to weigh those things when they make capital investments. Every capital investment a business makes, they have to determine whether or not, okay, when is that going to pay us? How quickly is that going to pay off? Or are we just doing it just because we want to do it? And so, yeah, man, I think it's a huge factor. It's probably the number one factor. But I don't think they would do it if they thought there was no chance Mike Norvell could have a good season next year.
Yep.
If that was the case, then I think people would have every right to be furious, and people may have made that own determination, and you might have as well. But my guess is they don't believe that, or they wouldn't do this. If this is where it ends up going.
A fun question to end the night. Who do you think is more mad at Mike Norvell, me or the administration? Because when they made these decisions and the extensions and the investments, I mean, times were good. They couldn't have seen this coming, where you had just won 19 in a row. You had just been snubbed, and it looked like things were very healthy in that moment. Do you think that they're more mad, or do you think that fans like me are more mad at Mike Norvell in this moment because of the difficulty that we find ourselves in?
A different kind of mad, but probably equally mad. Because and the thing we got to remember about a lot of these people that are making these decisions. Now, Michael Alford's the AD. He's going to live in this world every day, every night. That's his job. But a lot of the people, the president of the university, the trustees, those types of people have jobs. Like they have things that Richard McCullough is running a university. This is now becoming a huge issue for him that he has to deal with, not just the financial repercussions, but the time investment, the conversations with stakeholders. Again, very few of the people watching this show, not all of them, but very few of them, or not none of them, but very few of them can get Richard McCullough on the phone or can get Peter Collins on the phone. But there are some people who can. And so they're hearing it from those people. Plus it's their job is dependent on Florida State being presented in the best light possible. It's the whole reason athletics gets as much money as it does and much attention as it does, because it does put the university in a favorable light. So yeah, they have every reason to want this team to be successful and to not have to be spending all this time on it. And yet here they are. So yeah, I think Mike Norvell feels all that. You mentioned earlier that, he looked like he was contrite and probably felt like he was about to be fired, because he knows that. He knows how much is at stake here. And, and again, those people certainly know how much is at stake here, but they have to make the best decision with the information they have. And I just think if they decide to run it back with Mike Norvell, it's because as you've said, they've run those numbers and they think that makes the most sense.
It's a personal appeal then. I can't get Peter on the phone, but a personal appeal. Peter, apathy is toxic. You hold the antidote. Help us all. Help us all.
How do you measure that? And I'm curious, and I brought that up in my column because I am starting to wonder if there's two worlds. There's the online world, there's the world that we live in, that are the people that are consumed with it, and I know there's a lot of frustration, and then the rest of the fan base, including a lot of people who give money, but maybe aren't as consumed by it. I do wonder if they have a sense of whether or not apathy is, because Stadium didn't look apathetic Saturday night in terms of the people that showed up, and the way people talked about the entire night. So that part of it, again, Bobby Bowden, the decision with Bobby Bowden for the person who said earlier they fired Bobby Bowden, but they can't fire Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to that crowd at that Maryland game. Mickey Andrews' last game. It was announced that it was going to be his last game, so you thought some people would come, and there was a chance it was going to be Bobby Bowden's last game. And that stadium, I think it was like half full. It was very empty, and I think that's kind of where those decisions get made. If people are still coming to the games, I don't know that you feel that apathy yet. But I'm curious how you judge it.
Well, yeah, I would say the numbers won't lie in that scenario. You'd have to look at fiscal year this year versus fiscal year next year. If you do keep them, you'll get your answer. But I just anecdotally, that's the best way I can look at it. They're already in. If you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound in terms of season tickets this year. But this is where actually being at Hotel Indigo for the pregame is worth seeing fan excitement and interest, because I'll look at those lots, Ira. Typically, we do it relative to kickoff at the same time every week, like 3-4 hours before kickoff at Indigo. And you take a look at those lots and how full they are, at 3-4 hours before the game tells you a lot about how much fans are making a day out of this, are just flying in, flying out, or they aren't coming by at all. And over the last 4 years, we've seen quite the spectrum from Mike Norvell on game days. And that's one way that immediately pops to mind. I'm sure we have friends at local businesses that can tell you one way or the other. But it's a calculation that you make on the future. So we don't know what people are going to do. It feels – I can tell you on a personal level, I can speak for myself, that the wind is out of the sails. That Virginia Tech game is a good win. It's a win that we should talk about a little bit more, and it's a win that Florida State earned, and they played from in front. They played largely clean. But I can tell you that as many of the events were happening on the field for those 60 minutes, I didn't feel moved the way I did even for, say, the Pitt game. And that wasn't a win, but I felt more moved by the ups and downs of that game. For Virginia Tech, it felt like we were just watching something before us.
Real quick, and I feel, listen, man, I think you have strong feelings about this. I don't know if everybody does. Like, you have had very strong feelings about this going into Stanford and coming out of Stanford. And if people that didn't, may see it a little bit differently. The last thing I want to say is this, and I don't know what's going to happen. They just got a commitment from a top junior college defensive end for next season, which is certainly positive news for FSU. If there is a propping up, if there is hey, we don't want to pay this guy this much money to go away, let's make sure that we're doing everything we can in terms of player acquisition. Say you go get a big time quarterback, say you go do a really good job in the portal and this recruiting class finishes strong. Does the apathy stay because people are just like, no, I can't buy into Mike Norvell? Or do you think people will find a way to kind of get enthused again?
Yeah, I think many will circle around. I mean, hell, I will, because I love this football program. So I'm going to find a way to be enthused for the kickoff and the building of that roster. But I would say if that's the decision you're going to make, the sooner that you can make the statement, the better. Like, I don't agree with that path, Ira, but give this man a fair fighting chance on the trail at that point to close the high school class, and then to go hit the portal and talk to these potentials and say that the offer I'm giving you right now on the phone is the offer that's going to be here, because I'm not going anywhere. Like, that would be my thing, is if you're going to go that way, Judge Judy, let's go. Then make sure you announce that, and we'll see what comes this week. Friday night, Florida State plays NC State on the road, 8:00. We'll have full coverage. Are you making the roadie up there?
Yeah, Corey and I will both be up there. We're not traveling together, unfortunately, so no, we won't get any good stories out of that. But yeah, Corey and I we'll be up there in Raleigh, see how things go at Carter Finley.
A fascinating week ahead, a fascinating week after that. Florida comes up on the horizon. What's at stake for Florida State? Just a little bit, like the future of their head coach. Stay tuned to warchant.com for all of that. Sign up for just $1. Join the largest and most vibrant FSU fan community on the Tribal Council. That message board updates frequently. A lot of new threads on these topics, so head over there and read the wonderful work by our own Ira Schoffel, whose 321 column is available right now. Is there one more thing that you would like to mention, Ira, before we sign off?
There is one more thing. There's one. Perfect. There's maybe one and a half, maybe 1.25. First of all, I did want to say, usually I try to acknowledge some of the chat and respond to some of the chat, but I knew how this conversation was going and the role I was playing in this conversation and the information I was going to share. that it probably wouldn't be in my best interest to see what was going on in the chat. So I apologize to people that I have not responded to in the chat. I may go back and read it later.
A lot of people were on your side. A lot of people said you were making plenty of sense.
All right. I just a little bit concerned about that. And I just didn't want to get dragged into that when we're trying to have the conversation. But the other thing I wanted to say is tomorrow night, FSU men's basketball is playing Tennessee Martin. And the Noles are going to honor Leonard Hamilton, I believe, at halftime. They're going to do a thing because Leonard Hamilton played at Tennessee Martin. And so they're going to do, a trailblazing figure in their basketball program. So he'll be back. And we interviewed him the other day. We'll have a story up about that, talking to Leonard Hamilton about what he's been doing since he stepped away, since he retired from coaching, and just kind of, what he thinks about Luke Laux and this basketball team that has gotten off to a great start, put a scare into Florida last week. Florida then turned around and drubbed Miami, who I can promise you, I know for a fact, Miami's put a lot more money into their NIL for men's basketball than Florida State has. So that trends well. That's really nice. That's a really nice week there for Luke to take Florida down to the wire, and then they throttle. And they did it in the O'Connell Center, whatever it's called now, in Gainesville, whereas this other game was a neutral site game in Jacksonville, and Miami got throttled. So that's a good sign for Luke and the men's basketball team. And they're at home Tuesday night. And I have a feeling it'll be a good crowd because I think people are getting excited about this basketball team.
I'm looking forward to it tomorrow night. Can't wait. I'll be walking over from the penthouse to see what they got going on. 2 games this week for Florida State. The other game, of course, because the ACC has to schedule football on a Friday, is Friday night. So you'll get a Noles doubleheader if you're watching around the country. Thanks to everybody for participating in tonight's chat. Great crowd in here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. It's always free. And if you want Florida State content on your home screen of the YouTube app or when you go to youtube.com, that's the benefit of subscribing to us. It'll just be waiting for you there when you sign on at YouTube. If you want to be a Premier member, that's wonderful too. But the subscribe button is absolutely free always. Ira, appreciate the discussion tonight. I always enjoy these conversations. Everybody gets a chance to speak and speak their minds. I thought it was very good. And whatever happens, we'll be covering this thing together. So that's what we have in front of us.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm with you. I do want clarity whether they're going to put out a statement. I think that maybe the concern about putting out a statement now is that if things don't go well at Raleigh, but then you're in that boat of, are you going to wait for they're in a tough spot. I don't know what they're going to do. I think clarity would be good. And hopefully we'll get it soon. And then we can start looking to what the future looks like, because even with these commitments right now, and again, got a big commitment today. It sounds like they're going to have a couple more here coming out of this past weekend, but it's hard for people to get excited because they don't even know if this coaching staff is going to be here.
This Band-Aid, it hurts. I know it's going to hurt more if I take it off, Ira, and I know it's expensive, but I got this urge. For Director Nick Carlisle behind the scenes, for Ira, my name is Tom. This has been the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Forrest. If you have insurance needs, russforrest.com. Make sure to support those who support us at warchant.com. We thank everybody, and we say good night, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Warchant TV.